Lacrosse community, hope everyone's having a wonderful day. My name is Ryan Berns. I'm the founder of the Lacrosse Leadership Institute. It's our mission to empower all those that love the game of lacrosse to utilize the skills that you gain from the sport, put them into your life, and accomplish the life that you want to live. Now, our guest today is no exception to this. I'm so excited to spend the day with Josh Barrow and share his story of how he came from Denver, ultimately was able to make it Division I, and now is a part of arguably the most prominent lacrosse program for the professionals that's going on right now. Josh, thank you so much for being here today. Can you share with our community how you got involved with lacrosse in the first place?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So prior to answering that, just a little background on myself. I did grow up in Denver. I did a PG year, which we'll get into. And then I played at the University of Delaware, and now I work for the Premier Lacrosse League, particularly PLL Academy. So funny, it's a cool story. I don't mean to be boastful, but I grew up playing baseball, basketball, and football, kind of the traditional three sports that you find in North America, in the United States particularly. And I really kind of had my eye on basketball. I really just loved it. It was kind of, out of the three that I played, I always found myself in the driveway shooting the most. And I wanted to go on and play college. And I kind of just put that was my target, is playing college basketball. And then my freshman year, I played football. My brother and dad kind of convinced me to play at my high school. My brother was the quarterback of the varsity team, and he was just like, you should come out and, just see how it goes. So fast forward a little bit, I go out for the team and I get a concussion that actually sidelined me for six months, I would say. It was difficult to kind of do anything in terms of activity, like, even biking slowly or swimming or anything that was exerting. So when I kind of after the picked up a basketball, looked at baseball and looked at kind of like, I don't have any of these sports. And one of my friends high school played lacrosse and just gave me a stick, and it kind of was one way from there, in terms of the three sports that I had loved and played my whole life kind of colliding in lacrosse, and I think I really enjoyed that. So, that's how I started to play. And I think it's important to mention, as we, look to expand the lacrosse community, you never know what, giving your neighbor a stick or giving your friend a stick will do in terms of kind of the sport and kind of the opportunity that you're giving them, because the sport has given me so much. And, I have to thank my buddy back in high school who kind of got me started.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, obviously, it really stinks the fact that you went through the concussion, but the ability for friends to be able to support you and get you on board, and then ultimately where your career has taken you is what I think lacrosse is all about. I think there's a lot of people that are very huge advocates that say, hey, if there's one thing that you can do to give back, it's bring an extra stick and give it to someone else. And I think that's a pretty unique story, and it sounds like that's how it impacted you. And then from getting involved in lacrosse, can you share a little bit more about that PG year and how your journey through lacrosse went?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, when I played basketball, I kind of was like, okay, I want to play at the highest level. So when I switched to lacrosse, it was kind of no different. And I was like, I want to play at the highest level, which would be Division I. And essentially, when I really picked it up my junior year, I went out to these recruiting camps, like I'm sure everybody in the high school range is doing. And what I found was any coach, no matter how I performed, really any coach would be saying like, hey, we like your play, but our recruiting class is full. Hey, we like your play, but our recruiting class is full. And to me, internally, I was like, well, this is a bummer because, I just started playing and there's zero opportunity. So it's not like, if I couldn't have dreamt there to be a situation where I played Division I because there was just no spots. So a coach, I believe, at Dartmouth was like, have you ever thought about a PG year? And I was like, no, I had no idea what that was. It's common in lacrosse and hockey. So after kind of talking with my family about it, we started to look into it. And I Googled, postgraduate high schools that are good at lacrosse or whatever. And one of the first ones that came, go ahead.
Josh, sorry for interrupting. Could you explain to those that don't know what a PG year is, what a PG year is?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially in my case, and in a lot of cases, you do your 4 years of high school, and then you do like another year at either the same high school or another high school, which essentially gives you an extra year to develop as an athlete, as a student, and also gives you an opportunity to essentially reclass, which is, if I was class of 2014, which I was, I could move myself to class of 2015, where there might be more availability in terms of recruiting. So what I would say is, to put it in kind of 3 points, is to develop more as an athlete or a student, to make yourself more available to college programs, and then kind of one that, many people, it doesn't have a lot of face value, but is to just develop as a young person. I think when I look back at that year, and I went into college, I was a little bit more mature in terms of my development. And I felt like, not to skip ahead, but it was probably one of the more impactful years of my life in terms of development, in terms of kind of looking internally and thinking through kind of, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. So does that help answer your question?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I think that does a good job of clarifying it. And I know you were talking about, you started Googling the PG schools that were good at lacrosse and how to decide what school to attend.
Yeah, so a few came up. I can't really name a few other than my, alma mater, if you will. There's a lot on the East Coast that are super strong. So when I went Googling, I found Trinity Pauling, which is kind of a traditional East Coast boarding school, pretty strong program, has a post-grad program. And I found the Hill Academy, and I'm sure I found others as well. But those are the two that kind of, I think we narrowed down to. So I looked at the Hill Academy, and, at the time, it's a really funny story because I didn't know much about lacrosse. I mean, I knew the Paul Rabels of the world. I knew, those type of characters, but in general, I wasn't totally aware of kind of everyone that historically was like an unbelievable lacrosse player. So I'm getting to the point, but I went to the Hill Academy, which is Brody Merrill's school, kind of unaware of who Brody Merrill was. And for anybody wondering, he's debatedly actually the best long stick midi of all time. He played at Georgetown, and then he's really dominated at the professional level, both on field and in box. So I went up to the Hill Academy for kind of a visit, and the person, his name is Jordan McIntosh, who plays in our league now. He was supposed to give me a tour, but he was actually out of town playing box. So Brody, gave myself and my dad the tour. So when we pulled up to the school, it was a hockey rink, and I looked at it and I was like, I think I called Brody and I was like, hey, we're at the address, but the school is like, I think we're in front of a hockey rink. And he was like, yeah, no, this is it. Like, that's it. So I was like, okay. And like, I will no offense towards the Hill Academy by any means, and I'll speak to kind of what that year did for me. But you imagine these kind of illustrious East Coast boarding schools with the beautiful campuses, not like a hockey rink. So we walk in and we meet Brody without knowing that we're talking and sitting down with the best LSM of all time. And if you know Brody, you know him to be super humble. You would never think that he was other than his size, professional, anything, just because of his humility and his ability to kind of connect with people. So he gives me the tour, definitely unique, like I said, in terms of kind of the facility. And the dorms were like a house kind of off campus that the kids lived in. And then we get in the car and I'm like, let's look up this guy. And then my dad and I are like, holy crap, like we just sat down, and had a 2-hour conversation with Brody, and he's, in the Hall of Fame essentially. So even after realizing that, I still had to the idea, because it was out of country, it was north of the border, and Toronto is really similar to the States. In all honesty, it's not like a huge culture barrier by any means, but it's still, as a young high school kid, I was pretty fearful of leaving home. So I was thinking of ways. My dad wanted me to do it. He's kind of this fearless guy that is super opportunistic, and he's like, dude, this is an unbelievable opportunity, super unique. So I was thinking of ways on the way home of how I could tell my dad I'm not so sure. And then I think I got home, and a few of the things that were going through my head is like, do I actually want to do this? Like, do I want to play division that badly? Do I want to go to another year of high school? I think this is super important in the case of anybody else that's thinking about doing a post-grad year, is kind of, as all your friends leave to college, going to another year of high school, and you're kind of making the sacrifice for your vision of playing college lacrosse, because your friends are like going to enjoy the college lifestyle next year. So I had these friends going to CU Boulder and going to schools in California, and I was kind of like going to the Hill Academy, this small little prep school in Toronto. But I was aligned with what I wanted to accomplish, and this seemed like the proper lily pad. So after some conversations, I was just like, let's just do it. Let's go for it. And I want to say, I'm super fortunate that this opportunity presented itself, both in the way Brody gave me an opportunity to go, and in the way the parents were willing to support it. So a lot of gratitude there. But so I went up there, and I think it's just a really cool metaphor for opportunity, because it was a rainy, snowy day, super cold in Canada. You pull up to the hockey rink, it felt like a shot in the dark, right? But something, even though I mentioned resistance, something was kind of internally telling me to take the leap. So I always think in metaphors and kind of philosophically about life. And I think, sometimes there's these opportunities where there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a feeling that, is pushing you. And I think it's ineffable, right? It's hard to put into words, but act on it if you ever feel that way. So I know that was long-winded, but I went up to the hill, and as I mentioned, the trajectory of my growth as a human, as a student, as an athlete just really took off because of their attentiveness to their athletes. And it felt like an Olympic experience almost, in terms of kind of how focused they were, not only in terms of athlete development, but personal development as well. We would journal in class, and like we'd actually meditate and stuff like that. So it was an unbelievable experience. I got to play with kids like Jeff Teat, who's kind of up and coming on the college scene. He's graduating from Cornell this year. Clark Peterson, who plays for the Redwoods. Kyle Marr, who had a really solid career at Johns Hopkins. So to circle back to the purpose of a PG year and to speak to your community, the high school that I went to had no college commitments at the Division I level. We lost more games than we won. And nothing against my high school program. You can only do so much with what you have. But to put yourself in an East Coast program or a Canadian program that is producing Division I athletes is super important, because you're playing with kids that you essentially want to play with or against at the next level. So practicing at that level of talent, I was not there when I got there by any means. Like I was not a Division I player, but when you practice with that kind of talent every day, it just happens. And there's the saying around, you're kind of the sum of the 5 people you spend most time with. So I believe that's true for personal and athletic in a way. Your game is going to rise when you're playing with that kind of talent every day. So I tend to ramble when I tell this story, but I do the Hill Academy experience. It was everything I hoped for and more. I still keep in touch with Brody on a regular basis and some of my friends that I made up there. And even then, when I went to the Hill Academy, there wasn't an opportunity for me to verbally commit to a college or get recruited, honestly, because even if you PG, it's kind of creating more opportunity, but nothing is ever guaranteed. So what the best option was to walk on. And I thought about 2 schools essentially, or I narrowed it down to 2 schools, one of which was Penn State and the other was the University of Delaware. And I visited the University of Delaware. I love the campus. I love the feel. I'd always been kind of in love with the East Coast. My grandparents live out in Delaware, so I always loved kind of that vibe and that area. And after I went and visited Delaware, I was just like, Brody, I think this is the right fit in terms of kind of talent, in terms of academics, in terms of coaching staff, in terms of feel, kind of all the things that you look for in a college. So then I was like, okay, now it's the next kind of time to prove yourself in terms of walking on. So do you have any kind of questions as I roll through the story about the Hill or anything like that?
Well, Josh, I love a few of the things that you pointed out. I mean, first and foremost, if you chose for yourself what your goal was, and you found those lily pads that you said that you needed to jump to get there. And I think finding that alignment is such a big thing to be able to identify. And whether you realize it at the time or now, as you look back at the experience, that's what you've made from it is truly remarkable. And then surrounding yourself by that top talent at Hill Academy. People that are inspired to play at the next level is what you said. You're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. We say, who's on your molecule? So who surrounds you? And ultimately, that produces success. I want you to keep sharing your story with us and share. It seems like each step of the way you're sharing your pinnacle moments. And I'm on for this journey. I know we all are. So please keep sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're right. I think the lily pad point is super important in terms of vision. And I think it's important to mention that the lily pads aren't always clear, right? And I'll say that I'm kind of encountering, as I graduated and I work in a professional setting, I'm kind of spotting lily pads as well. So it's almost kind of a reset in terms of what my vision is now. And I'm carrying that philosophy that I had through my lacrosse career into how I view my development now. So I think getting back to Delaware. So then I arrive on campus as a walk-on, and that was definitely a unique experience. Every player or every recruit was kind of roomed with another teammate or other teammates. And as a walk-on, I was rooming with, regular students. I don't mean to demean them by any means, but like I was dorming with just college students as opposed to other kids on the team, and that kind of posed, that it can damage the ego, or however you want to call it. It's not ideal. And in addition, when you arrive on campus, you get cleats and backpacks and sticks and gear and more gear. And I was like wearing a Delaware t-shirt from the bookstore to all of our workouts and practices. So it was kind of like this chip on my shoulder. It was in between kind of this chip on my shoulder and, prove yourself mentality, and balancing that with like, this is challenging because I feel a little bit out of the team. So when I walked on, it was about a month or 2-month process. Through fall ball, you have about 6 weeks, and you have workouts. I essentially kind of view it as arenas to prove yourself, right? You have like workouts, so that's like strength conditioning. You have the classroom, you have kind of the field, obviously, and then you have kind of general, like hopefully you're not getting in trouble by any means, and you're just carrying your weight as a college student and as a Delaware lacrosse player. So strength and conditioning wise, I made sure to try to win, every race there was, just because if you're a coach, like, and you see the same kid winning every race, and he doesn't necessarily pull his weight on the field or in the classroom, that helps, in terms of like, is this guy going to be a valued member of our team? Like, if he's pushing himself to this level every day, even if he's not the best player, I think he's going to make some of our best talent rise to the occasion because of character. And then classroom, I've always been a pretty solid student, so I didn't really struggle there. And then on the field, I played well, and it was actually funny because I made the team, and I was for the last like 2 weeks, I was playing through a stress fracture on my right foot because I think I was running so much, and I was, it's called a stress fracture for a reason. You're over stressing the bone or the muscle. So I was playing through this kind of pain. I don't mean to overhype it, like it was doable, but for the last 2 weeks, it was kind of this fight to make sure I was going to be, circled on that final roster. So the time came, and we ended up cutting, I think, 5 to 10 players, and I ended up making the team. And I think my talent was there, but I will just really emphasize the importance of character in terms of taking care of your work in the classroom, making sure you're in shape, because you just, if they're sitting down as a coaching staff, you don't want to give them any reasons to cut you or look past you. And I think that was a lot of what Brody, the year prior, was preaching to me. So then that kind of kicked off my experience at Delaware, and I was happy that once you made the team, you were on the team and you didn't have to walk on every year. I didn't know if that was going to be a thing or not. So it was relieving to know that I kind of had a spot guaranteed for the next 4 years, and I was able to kind of put my feet up for a little while. So then, my college experience was pretty unique. I'd say, like, I was always, my freshman and sophomore year, I was always competitive. I was always kind of like in the second line position. And I think my sophomore and going into my junior year, I saw some time, but not much. Like I said, injuries were kind of always a challenge for me. I had a stress fracture in my foot my freshman year. My sophomore, actually, I think my junior year, I tore my labrum in my shoulder. And then my senior year, I got another concussion. So I think, I've obviously looked back at it a lot, because I think it adds value. I think we often hear from the people that were suiting up on game day and putting the balls in the back of the net. And those guys should be, one of the loudest voices in the room. But I do think that, there's 20 players that get PT on game day, and there's 30 players that don't necessarily. So I always viewed my role as critical in terms of like making sure, I roomed with players that were captains or that were starters, and I saw my role as kind of making sure that they were staying true to what they said they were doing, and kind of pushing them along, because I always thought like my character was a strong point. So as I look back, do I think that I would have loved to go to a D3 school and gotten more minutes? I don't know. It's a debate in my head, like, because I set out to play Division I lacrosse. Sometimes I wish I would have said like been an All-American or something, because maybe if I set my goal higher, I would have just kept pushing and pushing, because I got to the D1 level. But I kind of go back and forth a lot, because I don't really regret my experience at Delaware. I don't wish, sometimes you wish you had an opportunity to play on game day a lot. Like I said, I got some minutes towards the end of my career. But it's something I go back and forth with, because like I said, everybody has different roles in life, and your role might be to be the all-star, or it might be the guy that's keeping the all-star accountable. And that is just as important in my eyes, because it's a team sport, right? And it can be cliche, but it doesn't, make it not true. Because as I mentioned, there's 50 to 60% of those role players that are pushing or moving the needle in terms of the team's level of play. So, that was my experience at Delaware. I think, like I said, I look back at it with not much regret. I made a lot of unbelievable relationships. I learned so much about, personal development, teamwork, leadership. It's important to think about. I learned how to be a leader, and also how not to be a leader. I learned how to communicate with different types of people, right? You're going to have people that listen to you and, are very clear in terms of like, you tell them to do this and they'll go and do it. And then you have other people that are, that don't necessarily kind of subscribe to that same philosophy. And you kind of have to think about how you're going to motivate them. So that was always kind of fun for me to like choose a player that may not be motivated in the classroom, and just think about how can I motivate them to do better in school, so we can have them on game day. So some of those fundamentals of leadership were really important throughout my career, and I just tried to suck everything out of the experience that I could, without skipping ahead, there's kind of another part of the story. Do you have any questions about kind of the Delaware experience or anything like that?
I think there's a few things that I do want to highlight about your Delaware experience. First and foremost, when we think about a team, it's the sum of all the parts. So the weakest link in that fence, if you will, is going to be a hole that someone can get through. And so whatever your role may be on the team, you can lift others up. And it sounds like that was really what you were mentioning when you were talking about leadership and how to hold the captains to their level. And then ultimately, when you get to that position where you're in the lead as well, it's making sure everyone's on the same page. Having that alignment is such a big thing. And it's critical that you recognize that. And I hope that everyone that's watching can recognize that as well. And because it's like this on every single team. And I know you're at a new team right now, and you have it sounds like a few different roles. So I'd love for you to share this next chapter that you found yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, lacrosse was always interesting to me when I started playing, because it's not like the NBA or NFL or MLB, NHL, any of these kind of huge sports leagues. It's very entrepreneurial in the way that prior to the launch of the PLL, players were accountable to themselves in terms of the money that they were making, the opportunities that they gave themselves, and things like that. So I always thought that was cool because I've always thought of myself as relatively dynamic. I like to kind of play with multiple things at once. So when I was growing up, I always, or in high school rather, I was always inspired by what Paul was doing, because like myself, I always loved to compete on the field, but I also was like, I'm kind of like a lifelong learner. So I really enjoyed thinking about things off of the field as well, whether that be kind of sports psychology or business or entrepreneurship. So I want to say my sophomore year, I emailed Paul's chief of staff, who I, work with now, which is funny, Andrew Manning, and I was like, I play at Delaware, would love to essentially work with Paul at Rabel Companies, which it was back then. I'm entrepreneurial myself. I love what Paul's doing in terms of growing the game, in terms of kind of making himself known in a sport that doesn't, always get the love that it should. And I think he replied and he was like, we might be able to give you an internship, but the fact that you're, playing college lacrosse makes it difficult because we're not going to, we'd like to have you in office and you're going to classes and practicing all day. So I was like, all right, that's a bummer. So then next year I emailed again, and skip ahead. Then it didn't work out because of kind of my schedule. Next year is my senior year, skip ahead, and I emailed Mick, who is the VP of growth at the PLL now, and he was the co-founder of Rabel events at that time. And he was like, why don't you come out for a few Rabel tour events, get to know us, we can get to know you, and then we'll go from there. So I was like, all right, I'd love to do that. So I go and volunteer essentially at a few of these Rabel tour events, get to know Mick, get to know Andrew, get to know Alan, who's Paul's dad, and get to know Paul. And it was kind of, I wasn't getting paid. It was kind of an opportunity play. Like, I want to do this. I want to be part of this. So again, like, what are you willing to sacrifice in order for you to kind of get there? So, early Saturday mornings, traveling up to Washington, D.C. and volunteering and stuff like that. And after that, I followed up with Mick again and was like, really enjoyed these experiences. Would love to maybe think about an internship over the summer. And this was, I want to say last summer. So it'd be 2019, like winter. And he was like, we have some big things going on. I think 2018 winter, I'm sorry. He's like, we have some big things going on. I'll keep you posted. And I was like, what's he talking about? And obviously they're building the PLO, right? And so he gets back to me. He's like, hey, we have an internship role in LA. And I'm like, wow, like, okay. And I talked to my dad. And like I said, I've just been blessed with a family that's kind of always given me an opportunity to like chase kind of my dream or my vision. So my dad works sometimes in Southern California and San Diego. So we rented out this place kind of in between LAHQ and his office. And I went up and then worked as an intern for the PLL Academy. And then really where it gets tough is halfway through the summer, I was like, this might end up being a job. Like if everything goes well, like this might be a job opportunity. So it was always in the back of my head. I didn't know it was going to happen for real. So, Mick sits me down one day and he's like, we're ready to offer you a full-time position. And I was like, so then like all these thoughts that I've been having kind of show up in reality. And I'm like, I forgot to mention that I was planning to go back to the University of Delaware for my MBA. So I'd already planned, I was already on the roster. I'd already, passed the MBA exam. So essentially I was faced with this other decision point, like, do I want to go back and play my fifth year, which I thought was going to be a really good opportunity for me to get substantially more playing time? Or do I want to join this team that's doing something, super unique and trailblazing in this sport? And And man, I must have gone back and forth for a month. Do I like, because it was challenging, because you want to play, right? Like, you can't replicate college sports. You simply can't. Like, there's a lot of experiences that I've had that I've really enjoyed, but in terms of like the camaraderie and game day and just the student athlete experience, it's singular. So I was going back and forth, and finally I was like, with how injuries have shaped out to be, generally, like, I was working out, preparing to go back, and I was like, my body isn't in ideal kind of condition. I've taken a pretty fair beating. I have a few concussions tallied. Do I really want to risk that and give up this opportunity? So essentially it came to one day, and I'll mention my mom always said, like, follow your energy, go where the energy is. And I just felt it all in Los Angeles. And I felt like the PLL and the culture was a really good fit for me. So the day came where I kind of made the decision, had to call my really close friends and tell them that, I was going to take this opportunity. Had to call my head coach, Coach DeLuca, who was unbelievably supportive in the process. It felt like he was making the decision with me. He put himself in my shoes, and it was really what I needed to hear. And now it's, life can be funny, and how you look at it retrospectively, with the things, the virus, the season I would have gone back for, would have been canceled, and I would have been taking online classes. And I can't guarantee you that every decision, the people listening will make will end up looking this great on the back end. But it just does speak to that kind of, follow your heart and go where you feel aligned. Yeah, I mean, so now, I've been working for the PLL full time for a year now. I'm working with the PLL Academy, which is really amazing. It's kind of our youth training arm. So we work with, we just ran a players tour in Phoenix. So it's a lot of opportunities to connect with the next generation of players. So I view that as significantly important, because as we build this league, what kind of generation are we bringing into it? And are they motivated to continue to try to put lacrosse on the map, and continue to kind of trailblaze the things that we're trying to do? So I view it as kind of fulfilling work, and work that needs to be done. So it's just, after all that, I haven't said, I haven't voiced over that story kind of from start to finish in some time. And it has just been a complete ride in terms of, big decisions that felt like they were going to be life or death, and they truly are not. Injuries, mental kind of barriers. As an athlete, it's often just so super challenging to stay confident, to stay resilient. So I've faced plenty of kind of slumps, as they call it in the MLB, where you're just not playing well, and you're trying to think, mentally, you're trying to make sense out of it. And then relationships and the teammates that I've been able to kind of stay in touch with, and the coaches that I've been able to stay in touch with. The lacrosse community is different in how tight knit it is, and how committed everybody is to its growth. And I think that is kind of what ties us all together. It's kind of our universal language. I'm super grateful that a few years back, 5, 6, 7 years back, a stick ended up in my hands, and it's been a hell of a ride, like I said. To anybody listening, I hope this story can speak to identifying opportunities, resilience, persistence, as I mentioned. Not only persistence on the field, but in terms of the job, I was following up with, people at Rabel events summer after summer after summer. It's not always going to be served up to you on a platter. A lot of the time you have to go out and put yourself out there. And like I said, I'm still employing the same tactics that I did back then. So the things that you're building and working with right now will help you in the future. And sport is such a powerful vehicle to learn kind of life lessons like persistence and resilience and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the story, man.
Josh, thank you for sharing that. I think there's so much in it when it comes down to, I call it grit, but it's that persistence, that resiliency. You keep that optimism. There's some internal why, something that has energy within you that pushes you forward, and you've demonstrated it through your entire story of lacrosse and finding it, like getting involved and just pushing it to where now you're arguably, again, you're in the mix of the peak league right now, what everyone's looking to. Do you have a peak moment in your journey so far that you've experienced, or a pinnacle?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I think that there's a few. I don't think I can narrow it down to one, because of how many together so perfectly. There's just, several times where I was like, this is insane. Like this the way that things unfolded just seemed kind of dreamy and unrealistic. But I do have kind of a few. I would say at the Hill Academy, there's a tournament up there called the NALI, which is the North American Lacrosse Invitational. And we played Culver in the championship, and I think we were down like 1 or 2 goals with like literally like 90 seconds on the clock, and we ended up coming back in that time and winning in overtime. And I think that encapsulated so much for me in terms of what I'd maybe given up to in a year of college to kind of follow my dream. It was kind of this moment where you're overcome with emotion, like because you didn't know it was out there to be experienced, but here you are, you made the decision, and it was kind of just this overwhelming moment, especially with a team that I had only known for 9 months, but it felt like I had been playing for 9 years. So that was really special. I think making the team at Delaware was another moment where it was just like, this is coming together. We all make goals, we all have visions, and oftentimes we achieve them, but when you do, it's this interesting kind of dichotomy where you're like, holy crap, I did it. And then it's like, well, I've been imagining this and visualizing this for the past half decade, so this is exactly where I want to be. So it's kind of this interesting balance, but making that team and kind of achieving this goal that I'd had for 5 years was really special. At Delaware, we beat Rutgers when they were #1. That was an unbelievable experience. You can't really make that stuff up. Like I said, upsets in college sports are just like the peak. And then getting the job with the PLL, I think the most recent, the most heavy in terms of emotions, because like I said, it was something that felt life or death. It truly wasn't, but making that decision felt like I was making a decision for myself. That was super important at that time. I think like it was a time to ask for maturity and asked for kind of rumination, and I think I made the right decision. So it felt good for sure to kind of see that all come to fruition, especially because like I said, working with Paul and working for that team was something I had also visualized for quite some time. So, like I said, it's hard to pick out a moment in a story that I feel so lucky to have. But those four kind of stuck out as kind of the front runners.
And one of the things I want to piggyback on, because they're all amazing, but you said it a few times, in the moment, these decisions you had, they felt like life or death. Obviously, it wasn't the case, but it feels that way. Every single day, I feel like that's the most challenging day we have, is new experiences that lie ahead that we don't necessarily know what's ahead of there. And we've got, I think of the ASU lacrosse team, there's alumni that we reach out to and connect with them, and they help shed a light. But sometimes you're not fortunate there, but we always look towards leaders to help us out with those decisions. And that's really what this Leadership Institute is about. And I want to ask you, Josh, what does leadership mean to you?
Yeah. So this is something I love talking about. I love thinking about. I love writing about. I've always been super enamored by leadership, how to become this, versatile leader that's able to carry, a team of 50 players or a company of 50 people, all with different backgrounds. How can you create a single message or single motivator or multiple that pulls everybody kind of in the same direction? So there is a quote that has always speak to me, and it's one that my dad kind of passed down. And I think it just covers a lot of my philosophy around leadership. It's a leader is best when people barely know he exists, not so good when people obey and acclaim him, and worse when they despise him. But of a good leader who talks little, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. So there's multiple facets of leadership, right? Like there's leaders that own the room and that speak to, that are just very good verbally and can motivate with words. And then there's leaders that kind of strictly lead and motivate by action. And I always thought that was kind of my strength. And I just think that this quote, it says a leader is best when people barely know he exists, but I don't mean that the leader is like in the corner and nobody knows who he is. I think that it means, you're not egoically, choosing yourself as the leader. You are acting as a leader without anybody, really for yourself and for the team. You're not doing it for reasons external. And I think that speaks to it. I think, it says who talks little. I think in such a noisy era, speech is super important to kind of be deliberate around. I think action, the old saying, action speaks louder than words, is spot on. But I think in a world where social media exists, so many layers of communication exists, how you act is bold and physical and very easy to learn from. Because of social media, and it feels like words have been devalued in a sense. And I don't mean to disclaim, the hype up speeches before games. Those are still absolutely necessary. But I think I'm trying to emphasize the importance of actions over words. And another kind of story that I'll reference is an Alexander the Great story, where he's taking his army into war, and they don't want to follow him. They're refusing. And he says, I'm pulling it up. He says, oh man. Okay, here we go. So he says he strips off all his armor, and he says, bring forth a man that's bled more than me, and we will go home. And it's a super kind of tough guy approach, but I think it just speaks to what I'm trying to say. Like, if you aren't, and this was also kind of mentioned in the MJ documentary, I don't know if you watched that, but if you aren't in the weight room sweating, if you aren't running the sprints or winning the sprints, if you aren't hitting the wall, then how are you going to ask people to return that favor for you? And I know MJ has said, I didn't ask anybody of anything that I didn't do myself. So, like I said, it's something that I ponder so frequently. But I think leadership is this balance of quiet and bold action, where people can learn from, and also understand that you are doing everything you're asking of them, and then a deliberate usage of words to motivate, yeah, so it's something that I think is dynamic. You're not going to be the same leader from the age of 15 to the age of 30. You're going to learn new tricks, new tactics. You're going to come across new people that you learn how to lead. So it's important as a leader to remain kind of malleable and adaptive, because there's no recipe for sustainable, leadership. It's going to be, it's going to change over time. So like I said, I think that there's bullets that, are important to remember and will always be kind of table stakes for a great leader, but also important to remember that you can never hang your cleats up as a leader. It's kind of this constant, learning and adaptation. So
I think that's interesting because you spoke about the lifetime learning earlier in our conversation. You said that's something that Paul does, and that's something that drew you towards them. And ultimately, it's that leader who puts himself in the masses. It's that servant leader who understands what everyone's thinking, everyone's trying to accomplish, and then figures out, hey, here's the light I'm shining forward. This is how we can get there. Let's all go together. I'll be battled and bruised like everyone else because I'm in this fight with you. And I think that's someone who can relationshiply bond with. And when you're able to bond with that leader, that's where there's strength in numbers, and we can all have just a magnified time and energy towards something. And that's that energy effect as well. And we've seen so many great leaders throughout time. And I think sports are a great way to identify those. So Josh, thanks for sharing that with us. And I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I want to ask, is there anything you're focused on that we can help you with right now?
No, I think, I really want to supplement to what you just said because it's speaking to me, and I think it's important. How you spoke to relationships and being, bruised and battled yourself. I think, a huge part of leadership is cultivating authentic and strong relationships, because a big, significant part of being a good leader is having hard conversations with people that may not be pulling their weight. So if you haven't cultivated strong and authentic relationships with those people, it's going to be very difficult for you to sit down with them and kind of tell them how it is. So in an effort to kind of get the most out of everybody, I think building relationships is hugely important. So I just wanted to add that. To your question, nothing in particular. I think with the academy right now and the PLL, we're always asking for more engagement from the community, which you guys, you came out to our players tour last year or last month. And I don't mean engagement in the way of, showing up to every event or blah, blah, blah. I kind of just mean it as a blanket over everything lacrosse. Are you engaging with your community like this in a lacrosse leadership kind of setting? Are you trying to convert multi-sport athletes to lacrosse? I think that there's, like I said, you just never know the impact you'll have with this sport, and giving a lacrosse stick to your neighbor, or showing a game to a family member. So I think above all, it's engagement and trying to get more eyes on the sport, because as far as I know, anybody that watches it or engages with it in any capacity is like in love with it. So I think our biggest challenge or biggest opportunity rather is to show the game to more people. And yeah, I mean, I think what I'm doing right now, a lot of my work is focused on our PLL verified program. So that is kind of supposed to, we're aiming to kind of bring greater connective tissue between us as the league and kind of the #1 brand is in lacrosse, and connect with clubs and organizations across the country in an ongoing sense. Kind of, you know, I'll use you an example. We used to just come into a market and have a great relationship with somebody for a month, and then we'd kind of stay in touch with them until maybe we came to Phoenix the next year. But I think it's super important to build, you know, as we've been talking about, kind of lifetime relationships, especially in this world where every person counts. So the point of the verified program is to kind of build robust relationships and connect our athletes, our league, to communities like yours. So, you know, if people want to do research on that and look into that program, I'd be happy to give more info on that. But yeah, man, I mean, like I said, this was an amazing conversation. It was nostalgic in a lot of ways. Reminded me of a lot of kind of tools and tricks I have in my bag that I can maybe bring back up to the surface. I hope it was helpful for anybody that listened. I think, you know, one question that I think is important is, you know, if I were to give advice to any young player out there, what would it be in playing at the next level? I think if I could give one piece of advice, it's super hard, but I think, you know, you talk about practice, and one of the biggest thing I focused on was perfect present practice. I think an easy way to close the gap between self and anybody else that's trying to play at the next level is being insanely present and deliberate when you practice, right? Like, because you're going to beat out the guy that's just kind of standing there hitting the wall, kind of with his mind elsewhere. If you're hitting the wall as if you're in a game, you are like, you know, the trajectory of your growth is going to be much higher than the others that you're competing with. So it's important to have fun. I don't want to take away from that, but when you do go out to practice, you know, make it in speed and make as present and perfect as you can, because that will compound over time. And that's a way that I found kind of in my short stint to make up that gap. So there you have it, man.
Josh, thank you so much, man, for your time. This has been full of just such value and stories that I don't think anyone could have dreamed we'd be so fortunate to hear today. So thanks for your time. Thanks for being a part of this Lacrosse Leadership Institute community. And thanks for all that you're doing as well in general around the world with lacrosse. With the PLL, it's amazing. I know you're going to keep on staying optimistic. You've got the resiliency, the persistence. I'm excited to see where you go and where we can end up going with you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, Ryan. Really enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be in touch.